Hello, everybody. Hope everybody is all right. I got more light on that side. I'm going to have to fix that in the next show. Sorry for the lateness. I just was talking with my sister. It seems that my dad has only a few days left on this planet. So we had a little conversation because I have all the details of the funeral arrangements that he had done in the past. So I gave all the details to my sister so she can call and have everything prepared for that. So here we are. So right now I was listening. It's not very strong tonight. Today, the Voice of America, 15,580. It's kind of weak. It's stronger than that usually at this time. So propagation is not up to par. I haven't checked. I got a lot of interference. I got some weird lines I see here on the SDR that I don't usually have. So I don't know where they're coming from. So bizarre. So, welcome aboard, everybody. This is the live show for Shortwave Radio, radio in general. We talk about radio every Saturday at 20 hours Universal Time. It's been 3 weeks since the last time we saw each other because I had 2 weeks off. And I'll talk about that a little bit. I'll probably take some time off this summer also. Kind of recharge the batteries a little bit. Got a lot of things going at the same time. But anyways, we talk about radio, all sorts of radio. It doesn't matter. It could be amateur radio, shortwave radio, medium wave, long wave, scanner radio. As long as it's radio, we're here and we talk about it. We have my name is Gilles. I'm located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, northeast part of North America. And we have a beautiful chat room with wonderful people. If you want to join in the fun and just chat, if you're new to the hobby, I think it's a great place for that. And if you are an experienced amateur radio or shortwave listener, you're also at a great place because we have all of that here from the experts to the newbie. And I think everybody is just having a great time all around, just having fun on radio in general. And it's kind of cool for that. So it's the fun thing of this place. The chat room. After the chat room, when all it's over, when you just have this over, what happens is that you go to the Facebook group. The Facebook group is a place where you go to for continuing the party, continuing with the radio, and having fun with the radio. We share a lot of what we're listening to, the radios we use, and all sorts of information. It's kind of a fun place. Been monitoring 87, 88. A lot of people mentioning they've heard WLO in Mobile, Alabama. 8788 is the frequency where most people are hearing. I haven't heard anything yet, but listen to that frequency like at the top of the hour. Some people are hearing marine broadcasts. These were gone a long time ago, and for some reason they seem to be back. So it's kind of interesting. What do we have? Masters Players Radio and Television plus Gaming. Nice to have you here. WA5107 SWL, Morgan City, Louisiana. Rob, nice to have you here from Phoenix, Arizona. Archer's Out of Crafters Kitchen from Massachusetts. We have Matt. Nice to have you here. MDK2 from Colorado. And no problem about where you are. It is always complicated when we move to when we go on vacation somewhere and the internet isn't really there. So it's part of the downtime, the moments that sometimes are like, yeah, well, it doesn't work. But hey, it's part of the game. I'm trying to remove this. Okay. What do we have? So let's continue down. We have. So Matt says, hoping to make a 6-meter de-expedition out of the of where he is. So that could be cool. That could be cool. What the hell? I'm trying to remove something. Here we go. Am I? I'm not. Here we go. Okay. What am I saying? Forgot a crucial piece of equipment. Oh, that's sad. 6 meters. I've been trying to get some 6 meter activity in the last month. I mean, June is usually the start of the strong period. It hasn't been that great recently. I've had a little bit of opening. I've had some contacts on 6 meters. Actually, on the PC here, I had a FT8. You see all the green here? That station's calling CQ. Just before I started the show, I left for an hour and a half my Yaesu on the 6 meter FT8 frequency, 50313. So we've got K2 TXB, K1 VMT. There's a lot of VE2s. There's, of course, it's the VHF contest this weekend, so a lot of CQ contests. We got an N4 SV, N8 LRG, KF8 MY. So there's a few stations that did go through, but it's a kind of very sporadic off and on 6 meters right now. So Kimberly K6YYL, ham radio lady, nice to have you here from California. Miji, nice to have you on board. I gotta do something to try to avoid this. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna move at the top. That's why. Now I got it. So here we go. Just trying to catch up. Okay, Richard Wagner, nice to have you here from sunny Northeast Illinois, WA9301SWL. We have, Matt is in Cortez, Colorado. So hope you're having at least a good time, even though you forgot some stuff. You almost have to make a list. When you go somewhere and you want to do radio, I think the best thing, you got to do a list. It's you always forget something if you don't. What else do we have? J Projects, nice to have you here. Dwayne, nice to have you on board from Northeast Tennessee. Robert Varner, nice to have you here. KC2TEL in New Jersey. Arjun Wiesman, nice to have you here from Cyprus. Long time no see. Nice to have you here. SM, nice to have you here from Cornwall, Ontario. We have RJD Dakota, nice to have you here. WA0113SWL. Winsville, Missouri. We have Nick Amundel from Romania. Nice to have you here. Jeff King, nice to have you here from Jacksonville, Florida. We have Trevor, nice to have you on board. We have 32 bits. Nice to have you on board. Just finished a new loop antenna. Will follow show's frequencies. Cool. Monitor 8788 upper sideband. Doug Smith, nice to have you here. We have DX Swinger, nice to have you on board from Southeast Pennsylvania. Gary24 Fan, nice to have you on board. Sunwave, nice to have you here. TVDXer, bonjour, ça va bien? J'espère que tu vas bien toi aussi. Anthony France, nice to have you here from sunny Florida. Greg Scher, nice to have you here from southeastern Illinois. Sunwave got an RSP1A. Hope you're enjoying it. It's a lot of fun to play with. We have no problem, guys. Jean Arash, nice to have you here. John Probst, nice to have you on board. Johan Dumbro, nice to have you here. Mental Lunar, nice to have you here. Mr. T, nice to have you here. Idaho Head, nice to have you here. Darren Rogers, nice to have you here from Long Island, New York, KB2AHS. What else do we have? John Earnshaw, nice to have you on board. M0JFE, ET himself, nice to have you here. Greg, nice to have you on board. Thank you so much. Stormers, Radios, and Cats. Number stations popping up all over the bands lately. Good evening. So, there's a lot of the number stations thing. I've seen a lot of reports of stations popping up on frequencies that are not listed anywhere, including Preom, which is kind of interesting and shows you that the good old number station activity is still something interesting, and it's still something that has a lot of activity on it, even now. KW1161, nice to have you on board from Tucson, Arizona. Kevin JN, nice to have you here. WS2H. Tech Guy, nice to have you here. Mr. T, what's your opinion on the Texan PL398? Is it still recommended in 2023? The 398 is nice. It's not one that I would personally recommend as a radio. It's a nice radio, but nothing more. I'd go much more into something like the PL368 or something like that instead, honestly. John Earnshaw, new Russia activity on 4875. Guess replacement for the Woodpecker. And says 6 meter been wide open here. Work Brazil from UK. Yeah, you guys in Europe. I was looking at the DX maps every day for the propagation on 6 meters. And even when I look at the clusters, it is kind of interesting to see that you guys have been enjoying so much 6 meter activity, while up here in Canada, it's been very, very difficult. There's been very little openings. The openings have been staying much more to the south of the United States and towards South America also. What else do we have? My experience with those cheap adjustable generic power supplies all over Amazon and eBay is not good. They're extremely noisy across all bands. Everyone, yeah. Well, it depends what you're talking about as power supplies. But if we talk about, I have it close to here. I can just show. Trying to figure out if I have it close. Yeah, right here. Anybody that wants a good power supply, I've got a 50 amp and a 30 amp version. This is great. This is affordable and very amazing. I even had someone test it, and it's truly high quality. It is still a switching power supply, but it's very quiet. And there's a noise offset. So if you do have a buzz on a frequency, the noise offset, you can actually remove it. But I've got a 50 amp now, which is it's something like a TP50SW2 or something like that. These are truly, truly amazing for the price. And there's even a couple of videos online of YouTubers that have ham radio operators that purchased and say that they are using that every day. The 50 amp one that I have here, which is also a switching, these are extremely stable, and I have zero noise in my Yaesu with those. Zero. If you do, it's because you're close to the power supply itself. Like if you'd power a radio that the antenna isn't too far, and even that, it's very limited. In general, the noise floor is very low, and if there is a buzz on the frequency you just tune the offset, and it's gone. But I'm extremely happy, and I don't see why I would purchase anything else right now, because here in Canada particularly, those analog power supplies that give you 30 or 40 or 50 amps, like a 30 amp and a 30 amp power supply, that linear power supply, new, there's nothing below about $600 Canadian. I ain't paying that for a power supply. It's not worth it. And they are heavy anyways. And I since I got those, they're lightweight, easy to bring along everywhere, and they are great. Honestly, I with those, I don't even see why I should get anything else. They are totally worth it, and they are very well built. But you got to get those because there's a lot of others out there. But the ones that I have, it's really, really, really good. I'm very, very satisfied, extremely happy with them. But you got to be careful because there's a lot of other brands and a lot of other types of out there, and those are not all equal. Some of them are noisy. Avoid the Pyramid brand switching. The Pyramid brand switching power supplies, they're crazy noisy. Those are totally to avoid. RJ Dakota recently bought a reasonable replacement for a cassette recorder, a Texan ICR 110. Huh, interesting. I didn't even know they had that. John McClure, nice to have you here. Risto Forsberg, nice to have you on board from Stockholm, Sweden. SM0SBT, nice to have you here, Risto. Andy New, nice to have you on board from Bristol, UK. M7CUN. Carol W7WXV from Oregon, nice to have you on board. Blogger Die grew up 30 miles from Mobile, Alabama. So you know what we're talking about. There's a lot of activity, and apparently they're back now. So it's kind of interesting. Nick Casarino, nice to have you here, Nick. Nice to have you on board. N6VOA from CountyCom. Nice to have you on board, my friend. Been a long time. Still using a lot of the CountyCom GP7 SSB. Love it. Still love it a lot. It's one of those great things to have. Neil Rigby, nice to have you here. Nottingham, UK. We have Mike WX50. Nice to have you here. Lafayette Markey, nice to have you on board. Hola. Bob Raymond, nice to have you on board. And NE1I in Nashua, New Hampshire. The Wind, 1960. Nice to have you here. David's Radio Room. With my arm in a sling, it is hard to type. Dean, KQ4ADJ. Nice to have you here, Central Georgia. Roberto Rojas, nice to have you on board. Again, Glenn Danzler, nice to have you here. Green DX from 1 to 3:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time last evening. Propagation has been extremely nice, honestly, and extremely nice in the late evening and all of the night, basically. I've been doing a lot of listening from about my main listening, I'd say, was done between about 03 and 06 UTC, and the which is about 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. here, and I've been enjoying some amazing propagation and lots of cool signals. Really, really cool. So base. What the hell is that? I'm just going to do this. No politics, and that is all. Word of warning, there is no comeback from talking politics. You're out and gone. What else do we have? So yeah, I think the best thing about the propagation is really right now, and in the long days of summer, late evening, late evening, through the night, midday is probably the worst point. It's local noon, 1 p.m. Lots of absorption now because the sun is really high in the sky. So it's probably one of the worst times. But surprises happen. I did contact with Indonesia on 15 meters, and it was 16 hours UTC was noon here. And I mean the signals, but with the higher solar activity, it's pretty cool, pretty cool. Francis Moore, nice to have you here from Birmingham, UK. Terrence, nice to have you here. KD2ANN in New Jersey. Man, I always forget not to do that. What else do we have? Ricky, nice to have you here. Ça va bien? J'espère que tu vas bien. And it's nice to have you on board from Alberta. Chuck, nice to have you here in 5KVO from South Texas. Bob Raymond says 6 meters, not very good indeed. Yeah, I think it's, I've always enjoyed 6 meters, and I've always enjoyed the openings there. So I always, kind of have a lot of fun when it's there. And even, when 10 meter with E-skip, like with the FM repeaters and all, it's kind of fun. The problem is that in recent years, it's been pretty active and pretty cool. Now that I really want it to be open because I can make ham contacts, it just doesn't open much. But I guess, it's going to happen as the weeks go on. I mean, summer is the time, so there'll be openings. It seems to be very, very tied into the weather phenomenon. So, and we had 1 week of really hot weather here where we reached 90 Fahrenheit, about 32 Celsius. But since then, it's been, 70, not even. We almost have a hard time reaching 70 Fahrenheit in the last couple of weeks. And this week to come is rain and like 68, 70 ish. Nothing, fantastic. But hey, I have maybe about 15 to 20 contacts made on 6 meters in the past 3 weeks. When it's open, I try. I don't succeed that much. I think my end-fed is not that great for that band, though. I hear, but it seems it's hard for me to reach out. So I had dismantled my disc on my Tram 1411 from the front. I was thinking of maybe putting it up in the back and trying 6 meters on that antenna because I know that it resonates on 6 for the VHF range. So I thought that could be an idea. How about try the Tram discount rather than my end-fed to see if it actually makes me reach more stations on 6 meters. So I'm going to check that out. John Earnshaw, 6 meters has feelings and is emotional. Bowman's, anyone still using Grundig G5? Yeah, I got mine. I haven't taken out the G5 in a while, and I would need to take it out. It's been a long time now. So radio I always loved quite a lot, especially on FM. If you have DX FM, it's great. Paul, nice to have you here from Southwest Michigan. See here where I am. Lost my spot. There we go. Okay. Greg says it's 83 tonight near Franklin, Wisconsin. Going to rain. Here we're going to have rain. Hopefully, where the rain is mostly needed because some of you have probably been affected by the amazing amounts of forest fires that we're having here in Canada. We had so many forest fires. It was kind of a record. We had never seen so many so early in the season. And one of the things that's happening is that it hasn't rained much in a while here, so the forests are pretty dry. It's easy to start a fire. So we've been affected a lot. The funny thing is, apart from some regions around, here in Montreal, we did have some slight smoke and some, it smelled like burning wood, but you guys in the States, like in New York City and so on, you guys had more smoke than actually we had here in Montreal. Pretty crazy. So, but and it's not over. We've got here. There's a village. You were talking this afternoon. There's a village up north here that is totally surrounded by flames right now, and they have no idea if they're going to be able to save the village. They're trying as best as they can, but the fires are just crazy. There's also been power outages because here the thing is, our power lines cross, the Quebec forest up north where the dams are. So when there's forest fires, the fires will pass. Some of them have passed near and even under some of the power lines. So in some cases, it hasn't done much, but we've had sporadic, not here where I live, but some areas had sporadic power outages because some of the power lines tripped because of the forest fires. So, and it's not over yet. Honestly, it's not over yet. So, it's a pretty delicate situation. I can tell you that. I can tell you that. What else do we have? We have Grandpa Piper Mike. Nice to have you here. SM5WPW, 100 kilometers northwest of Stockholm, Sweden. Nice to have you on board. I've made a contact with Sweden and Norway this morning on 15 meters. Robert Cross, doing okay. Doing okay. It's life as usual. Tristan, nice to have you on board from a wet and rainy Newfoundland. John Beckham, nice to have you here from Northeast Florida. And still a lot of the fires are out of control. We're still, they're saying until Monday. What would be needed badly is a lot of rain. We haven't had any enough rain. I mean, here in the south, we had a little bit of rain this week, but it's not enough. It dries up immediately. We really need like a steady 3-4 days of good rain. And they're saying hopefully this week and the week to come here, at least in the south, is pretty wet. So we're going to see if that's going to help for the rest of the province. And it's not just here; it's a big chunk of Canada that's burning a lot, including even in Alberta and all of that. There's a lot everywhere. It's pretty crazy. So. What else do we have? CC, nice to have you here. WO8USA. And I recall we had a ham contact. What do we have? RY491. Nice to have you here, Thomas, in the UK. Have you ever used an old tube commercial receiver? Great fun to use. Plenty of drift on SSB. I've had and when I was a teenager, I've had and I wish I had kept that. It truly was something. I told a story I've had, and I don't remember what model, and I don't have pictures of it, which is sad because I would like to know what I had back then. So, one of my cousins had a huge rack with a World War II receiver. It passed World War II. It was more like maybe in the late 40s, early 50s tube receiver. It was a general coverage, and at the top, so it was two parts: big radio with knobs at the bottom with the little V shape, the green V shape for the signal level, and at the top was the power amplifier and audio amplifier and all of that. So it was in two parts, and it's darn heavy, and it was huge. So when my father saw that at my cousin's place, he said, "Oh, what's that?" He says, "Oh, it's an old radio, an old army radio. It's for the army. Apparently, if I had the proper tubes, it also was a transmitter, but one of the tubes for the transmitter was missing. So he says it doesn't work." Says my dad looked at it, and he knew I dabbled in electronics a little and all of that. Says, "Oh, and so you're keeping it?" Says, "Well, I'm thinking of getting rid of it. It doesn't work." So my dad said, "Well, I'm going to bring it home. I'll show it to my kid." So I bring it home. I look at the radio. I plug it in, switch it on. That doesn't do anything. So I start looking around, and I see that there's a little fuse in the back. So I unscrew the fuse, and I look. It's like the fuse is burnt. So I look at the fuse, and I was like, I got a replacement. I got the exact replacement that goes in there in one of my little compartments. So I was like, oh, I'm going to put the fuse, switch it on. Little red light turns on. It's like, oh, something's happening now. And after about, I don't know, 20 seconds, time for the tubes to warm up, start hearing static. I put my 100 feet antenna on it. I could hear international broadcasts, but it was the first time ever that I've had a tube receiver that was single sideband, which was kind of very, very interesting. And it was obviously a pretty high-end radio because it drifted, but it wasn't that bad actually. And man, I enjoyed that radio a full summer until one day I turned it on and like tons of smoke starts coming out of the top part. So I switched it off immediately. And I would have had to have somebody look at it. Something happened, and something blew, and it just started, having tons of smoke everywhere. And after, I think is when I moved. When I moved, it was so heavy, it didn't work. It was very heavy, and so when I moved, I said, "No, look, I'm not gonna bring it. I'm not gonna bring that with me. It's just too cumbersome. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it." So what happened is I told my dad at the time when I moved, do whatever you want with it. I'm not bringing that with me. So he ended up putting it outside to see if somebody would pick it up, and I think it took an hour, and a guy came up with a pickup truck and actually took it and brought it home with him. So it's like, yeah, maybe it made somebody else happy. Maybe somebody fixed it. Hopefully. But that was a cool summer with that tube radio. It was really, really cool, and it was a lot of fun for the time that it lasted. Basically. Um, what else do we have? Okay, what else do we have? Carol, speaking of politics, could we see France 24 do a shortwave broadcast? Yeah, they're all over the place. They have a lot of outlets. It'd be fun, but I don't think that it's their. I don't think that's what they want to do. What else do we have? Okay, the ACR 110, so it connects to a miniature SD card. Okay, interesting. What else do we have? Stuff to trying to bring the chat. Let me just bring it here. There we go. What else do we have? Ray Boyle, nice to have you here from Stockport, Britain. We have. So let me just do this. Yeah. Trying to reach the bottom. I'm going to turn it around. I think it's going to be better if I turn it around. Is that no? That's the top part. I think this is easier like this. Okay. Michael, nice to have you here from New Jersey. Rob, nice to have you here. We have Robert Cross, my long wire working great. Having a hard time with my tablet. Sorry, guys. What do we have? So that's cool. Long wires are great antennas, honestly. As long as the noise floor where you are isn't too bad. Long wires are pretty good. What else do we have? Joseph Curtis, nice to have you here from Toronto, VE3DZX. Nice to have you here. Some Rainbows and Cats. Talking about the forest fires. Is muting the colors. Yeah, it looks weird with the forest fires, smoke. Everything looks bizarre. It's so weird. So weird. Jim's radio check. Didn't have much snow here in the winter. Haven't had a drop of rain since May 3rd. Yep. Paul had 3-4 contacts on 5125 SSB, all within 500 miles. So, using a discount. Francis Moore enjoyed my explanation of ESCAP. Yeah, which is very, 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 very different from the standard propagation conditions that we have on HF. This is one thing that a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge about. And what happens is that a lot of people will not tune, for example, 10 meters at night because they all think that because it's dark, it doesn't work. And that is a lack of knowledge. When I say that we should all tune the bands, even if we know that we're not going to hear anything, we should always tune the bands anyways. So, you might be surprised, and sporadic E can happen at any time. So 10 meters or even 6 meters could be open at 2 a.m. in total darkness because it doesn't depend on that. It's a different way of propagation. Also, the thing to note is that as we approach the slowly the maximum of the solar activity, remember that 6 meters might even open up if the solar flux is high enough, because it might actually go into make the propagation possible in 50 megahertz. What else do we have? The Weatherman here. So Mike WX50, Weatherman here in Northwest Arkansas, said that we actually got some of the Canadian fire smoke here, although I didn't notice any smokiness. Yeah, but you know what? There's two ways, and here in Montreal, that's one of the things that we had. The For a couple of days, it didn't smell or look smoky at all. The smoke was in the air. So if you looked at the sky, instead of having a blue sky, you might have noticed that your sky is more like of a milky white color. and that is Canadian smoke that was over your head. A lot of people had the smoke, but the smoke was very high. So it showed in the sky. If you looked at the sun, for example, it was more of an orangish color, and you don't necessarily have it at the ground level. It depends where you are. Some of us had it at the ground level. Some of us had it just at very high altitude. So on the bottom, where you live, on the ground, you didn't have any pollution from that smoke, but it was still passing overhead. So sometimes that could be the thing. John, Tampa, Florida. Nice to have you here. Miki Dalmage, nice to have you on board from a very hot, smoky Sherwood Park, KBS World Radio, like local this morning on 15575. Yeah, it's been coming in really, really well. So it's pretty cool. Let me just try to catch up where I am. Mark, nice to have you here from Vancouver. Chris, G7 VEO, nice to have you here from out east of England. Richard Wagner says here near Northeast Illinois, can see the sky is hazy towards the east. And my wife has asthma, and it's tough on her. Yeah, I can imagine a lot of people having a hard time due to the forest fires, unfortunately. So if you have asthma or any type of respiratory problem, it must be really, really tough. I can imagine that. Bowman's, anyone still using a Sony Earth Orbiter? That must be. That must be. Ray Boyle says it's really warm in Stockport, 30 Celsius. That's not. Tristan has Radio Romania pretty good on 13650. RJ Dakota, I would love to have an MLA 30 plus, but don't know where I would put it. It's not that big. You might be surprised at how you can find a spot for it, because it really isn't that big. So what do we have? Yeah, location plagued by noise. Yeah, that's the biggest problem. It's always when you look at it, how really the hobby is plagued by noise. This is really the number one thing. It really is what kills shortwave before anything else. And what happens is that, when we talk about and go in the past, when we look at stations receiving less mail and all of that from listeners, I could see that part of it could go with the fact that the rising noise made it harder for a lot of people to hear things, and they just abandoned the hobby. And so there's part of who we lost that would maybe write to stations and all of that. Part of it is due to the noise. And today we're plagued. I mean, the number of people that will come back to me and say they don't hear anything. You know what? It's crazy because the noise floor everywhere, and it's tough to explain, because static sounds like static. Turn on a radio, you're expecting it to have static. You just don't really notice how the static is really too high, and you don't hear anything because it's washed out in the noise. So that's sad. It's really, it's really that that's killing the hobby. A lot of people are just plagued with that, and the internet has nothing to do. A lot of people is like, oh, the internet's killing shortwave. It is not. It is not. It never did. It never did. Many other things are killing shortwave in general, and the internet is not part of it. Um, mm, 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 mm. Yeah, the old radios, Robert Cross. A lot of, but back then my knowledge of tube radios was very limited. So for me, it didn't cross my mind. For me, the only thing that would blow up in such a device would be the tubes. But that was my teenage years when my knowledge of radio electronics, especially for tubes, was not very good. Um, Paul, nice to have you here from Vermont, AA1SU. We have Craig Martinetti, nice to have you here from Canada. We have Storms, Rangers, and Cats 4332 as a weak carrier was reported as a new marker station from Russia. I can only copy the carrier and lower sideband in the noise. Huh. There's a lot of those. There's a lot of these markers that pop up everywhere. It's crazy. What do we have? Doug Smith. Do the Canadian firefighters use ham CB or shortwave? They're probably using mostly VHF local communications between them and the planes and whoever, because they go there as a big group of firefighters. So communications between them is probably a line of sight for the most part. And so for the most part, most of what's happening is probably they're probably using VHF radios, VHF, UHF radios of all sorts in between them. That's would be my guess. I don't think they're using anything else in the HF spectrum. But it'd be kind of interesting to see what exactly is the equipment they're using, because definitely, I know that up north, and I got a document, a PDF here that Sheldon actually uh, sent me last year, which explains all the HF radios and HF stations that are temporary installations that pop up across the Canadian Arctic for all the science and all the companies that go there. They need to have communications, and that there's monitoring of 24 hours a day of specific frequencies uh, in case somebody calls for help. Need to dish out that information. It could be a nice thing to do for the messenger utility column also. Um, I remember I saw the frequencies, the equipment they're using. They have these quick dipoles that they can quickly put up at any campsite that they have up in the Arctic, and it's really neat. So that could be pretty cool too to talk about. Craig WDX2ROE. Glenn Zegman, nice to have you here from a very hot Southwest Ohio. Bowmans wants to know what's the best switch cleaning spray for old radios. Red Boy, do you know of any Canadian radio stations that's specialize in progressive rock. I'm not, you know, I don't follow much of what's happening in time in terms of what is, content on radio in general. There are some rock stations definitely in Canada. We have one here in Montreal, which is Shom FM. They do play some progressive rock stuff, but I couldn't say honestly. Apparently, AM radio has been saved. Well, I don't think it's been saved yet. They are talking about it. There was the hearings this week where there was a couple of people that talked, a couple of groups that talked about why AM radio is important. I think this is cool. I think the noise created around all of this is nice also for because it kind of brought to the forefront that AM radio is one thing that's very unique that you don't have on any other type of communications. It's the ability to create and go long distances, and that's I think the focus we need to have on AM radio. Because in emergencies, you're trying to contact and give info to a devastated area where often it also means there's no more internet, no more cell phone, but you still need to have news going through. And AM radio is good for that because it will go hundreds of kilometers or hundreds of miles. And at night, it's even worse. At night, it will, truly go many states. So you could have a station, an AM station from another state, even give information to a state that might be having tornadoes or whatever, and the infrastructure is down. And I think we got to keep that in mind. Here, we're not saving AM. We got to, in saving AM, we got to remember we're not saving AM uh, necessarily for its content that we have today, because there's a lot of trash. There's a lot of cool stuff too, a lot of local small AM stations with a lot of interesting information. But we got to work on saving AM for its capability that nothing else pretty much has, unless you got satellite radios, and people in homes don't have that. So if you live in a rural area hit by tornadoes, you don't have local FM, you need some station, you need information. Well, an AM station much further away will give you that info, and that's where AM shines in the emergency times. Look in Florida when there was hurricanes. Look at WFLA, 870 kilohertz. They got tons of calls of people thanking them because the only source of information on what was happening and the efforts to the emergency rescue teams and all of that um, is is was giving all sorts of information through that. And I think this is where we got to understand all of that. Having these stations there is important because one of the groups that was at the hearings was a group for high new technology. They were obviously talking, for their own good. Oh, well, no, today people are streaming stuff and we have all these wireless devices and blah, blah, blah. And you know what's the problem here? The problem here is, yeah, but one of my comments I made in the International Radio Reports is I wish this guy would be in the middle of a, devastated tornado zone or hurricane area. He's going to see that all of his wireless devices are completely useless suddenly, and he'll be happy to have an AM radio to hear the news. It's that we got to focus on. This is a very important task that we need to make everybody understand, because it's it's crazy. Look at WCBS in the East Coast here from New York. Look how huge of a signal it has in so many states, even across northeast, the east part of Canada. Imagine if there's something that happens, a huge blizzard. Here up north, we don't have tornadoes. We have tornadoes, but not like Tornado Alley. We do have sometimes hard, very serious thunderstorms. But the biggest thing, on the East Coast, there could be a hurricane going up the East Coast. All the states that get damaged, and all the damage created, the flooding, the winds, and everything. That's going to knock down all of your technology. There won't be streaming capabilities. Your phone's going to be stuck doing nothing. Here, we had that quick ice storm a month and a half ago. And I mean, it was, my phone couldn't connect to half of the time. It couldn't connect much. I had very slow internet. Forget streaming. Everybody was using the data off of the cell towers. The cell towers are completely overloaded. This is where, what? My neighbor, I had a chat with my neighbor in the building here. And the first thing he said is, I didn't have an AM FM radio, and I didn't have news. My phone wasn't working. And of course, no electricity, no TV, no nothing. We got to stop thinking that the technology we have today is fantastic and it always works. It doesn't when we're in times of some major event, and we need something to fall back on. And in this case here in North America, AM radio is really something we can fall back on, because a station outside of the devastated area will be able to broadcast information to us. And that's what we need to focus on. RJ Dakota, the sky over New York. Oops. Lost the yeah, well, I saw the pictures of New York City. It was like crazy with all the smoke and stuff. Art Don, nice to have you here. K280C from New Jersey. We have Error Mr. X. Nice to have you here. So RJ Dakota, the opposite is true for me. The internet helps me. Many sites help me find the stations I'm listening to, and other sites also help me with a hobby like Shortwave Underground. Yeah, it's the same for me. If I had the capabilities of what we have on the internet in the 80s, man, it would have helped me so much in learning my hobby. Back then, it was like difficult. Am I hearing? I'm not hearing anything here. So you guys closer to the south, you hear anything on 87, 88 upper sideband? A lot of people have been saying at the top of the hour, we've had they've been hearing stuff. I see here that YouTube is telling me there's going to be ads, so I'm going to take a little break of talking so that guys don't miss anything. And I'm going to actually wait until the ads go through so that you guys don't miss out anything on what I'm saying. Vianney Arsenault, salut. J'espère que tu vas bien. Nice to have you on board. in the eastern part of Quebec. So, Milb Elect, nice to have you here. And says Grundig Satellite 400. I had the Grundig Yacht Boy 400. I don't remember a Satellite 400. I had a Grundig Yacht Boy 400 though. Um, mm, 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 mm. What else do we have? Jay Watterson 69. Nice to have you on board, my friend. We have John says I grew up on AM radio and WCBS News, Radio 88. Yeah. Robert Cross says I put a lot of work fixing a lot of those old vintage radios. Would be nice if the AM would come back. Yeah. John says AM should never go away. I agree. Brian Penny, nice to have you here from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Pretty cool to have you on board. Pretty cool. Hey, I'm pretty much down now. Do you think, Joe, they might think about saving AM radio? Well, it's one of the things that is interesting in there, I got to say, is that the a lot of the AM stations aren't really participating. By the way, Anthony, and single sideband synchronous detection does not work. It does not do anything. It works only for AM radio stations. It has to be AM mode because the sync detector locks on a carrier to give you the synchronous detection. On a single sideband, it has nothing to lock onto. So it technically probably didn't do any difference. It probably stayed more into the. It's just that you were an upper sideband. That's all. Because synchronous detection, a lot of people don't know that synchronous detection, and because a lot of people get mixed up because it says upper and lower sideband. The thing is, synchronous detection is made there to actually use the AM carrier. So it's on an AM signal, and then you choose the upper or the lower carrier from that AM signal when you're using sync detection. But synchronous detection needs to sync to something, which is the AM carrier and an AM broadcaster, like shortwave and AM and stuff like that. So probably just if you change the sync and you say it's better, probably it's just because the signal might have been better. That's all. So you guys heard something that ended. So obviously there's something there. I'm going to monitor a little later. Here, probably at this frequency, it doesn't propagate up to me. But technically, what people have been hearing, the top of the hour, mostly what I've heard, and it's usually like a marine weather bulletin that is sent out, and then they just stop. So I I don't know. I'm going to continue monitoring tonight to see if I can hear something. So nice to have you here, Brian Penny. We have. What do we have? Yeah, the budget, the Degen DE13 is surprising little radio. Honestly, I have one here. I haven't taken it out in a long time. I need to take it out for a spin, and it's fun to have the solar charging capability. What else do we have? So marine weather broadcast. So here's in Florida. One of the things that makes it maybe tough for us to hear it up here is also the fact that it's probably broadcast to the Gulf of Mexico. So it's probably a directional broadcast towards the south. Makes it tougher for us up here to hear it. But so here we got confirmation that there was a marine weather broadcast from Anthony. So cool. Shelly, nice to have you here from South Central Pennsylvania. Nice to have you on board. Craig, W9CFW, nice to have you on board. We have going down. Yeah, because that's a common, when you don't really know exactly what the synchronous detection does, it's a common mistake. People tend to use sync; they think it does something, and most of the time, it's because like I said, it has LSB and upper and lower sideband, so people think it must be something about sideband use, when in reality, synchronous detection is really meant to be used only on an AM signal. It doesn't add anything to a sideband signal because it doesn't synchronize with it. It can't. There's no carrier to tell it how to synchronize. What do we have? ADK, make a C64 radio. Like or not, according to the schedule, WO give marine weather at 0, 15, 30, and 45 minutes. So it's interesting. Because they were gone. I mean, for many years, they were just not there at all anymore. So it's kind of nice to see that they're back. I guess there was a need for them to come back and give marine broadcasts. John says, agree with you. I had to read books back in the 80s unless you had access to bulletin boards. Yep. Oh yeah, it's definite. It's crazy what when you look at it today. That all the information we had back then, which was really, really just it was difficult. We had to read books. You had we had outdated information from club bulletins. We'd hang on to those papers. We'd have the schedules, and often by the time that the schedules would get to us from those stations, they were out of date. So it's kind of funny. Storms Cat 8788 no go. What do we have? Southern Illinois Shortwave. Nice to have you here. To let you know, actually, I'll let you know in the email. What do we have? Darren Rogers. Nice to have you here. Yeah, you can write your congressman in the United States to help save AM radio. Definitely, it's pretty cool. Vojislav, nice to have you here from the Belgrade, Serbia region. Nice to have you here. What else do we have? Artist Helicopter's Kitchen, most overrated and overused feature in shortwave. Yeah, I tend to agree with you too, but you know, there's diehard people that believe in it, so it's Robert Cross. I have a YouTube radio channel. Is that okay? I could start using it on here for the next week. Yeah, sure. I got no problem with that. Got no problem. As long as the my rule is I don't mind when we share about other people's YouTube channels and stuff. It's really my rule is that it has no politics, that it dabbles mostly about radio, and it's fine. We're here to help each other. Pirate on 6950, Voislav says. Radio Kid, hooray, AM, medium wave radio. Let me see if I hear anything on 6950. And I do not have nothing even showing up on the waterfall here. Craig, I want Ecuador. I went to Ecuador, Saudi HCJB Studios. Oh, cool. This is cool. Really nice. Really nice. Well, you know what? I might be hearing very weak something. Not sure. It just, goes crazy. To Rogue Tim, if that was the case, why is Radio Netherlands gone? Tell me. Why is HCJB not doing online English shows like it did? It doesn't. It's not. The big stations are leaving shortwave to North America, not streaming. The only streamers are the big government-owned stations, like the BBC, stuff like that. Those are government entities. They always had streams when it was possible to do it. It isn't the internet. No station is streaming because it replaced shortwave with streaming. None. The only ones that are still there are the ones that are the stations that are government owned, that have their own streaming services already in place. And they're not having it. They're having it mostly for the purpose that they're online. But 80% of all the shortwave stations that left during the times the internet streaming was a capability, all left and never had a stream. Show me Radio Norway that left as the streaming was possible. Radio Sweden, they had for a while, they stopped. They have a week little thing in English, that's it. It isn't true. No station is doing that. If they were, we would still have a fair amount of all of that content available to us. It's not. It's not there. So no, it isn't. You are wrong. You think that's the case because you probably have some specific, like you're going to take the BBC and say, well, look, the BBC is online. Yeah, but that's different. It's a big broadcaster from the UK that has streaming capabilities. Where is Radio Canada International in its form that was Radio Canada International? It's not there. It's a big joke of a little program that's put online and that's it. And even that, they're shutting it down slowly. You're going to see RCI's what left of Radio Canada online. What you have online is the CBC. It has absolutely nothing to do with RCI at all. It's the Canadian broadcaster broadcasting to Canadians. What you hear on the CBC on the streaming you know, is the CBC for Canada, for Canadians. It has a lot of programmings that are uninteresting for any outside of Canada because it's not appealing to you. It's not appealing to an outside audience. It's appealing to Canadians and Canadians abroad. But it's not Radio Canada. So you got to make a difference here between what shortwave broadcasters are and why they stopped broadcasting and what local broadcasters are. Look at all the countries that were on shortwave that had an English language show for North America. Even if they exist today, go to that country, you're going to see there's nothing in English or nothing in other languages than their own main language they're talking in their own country. So, no, it ain't true. It is not a thing. If it was, we would have the majority of the same big content we had before. No, only thing that we have is each country has its own services. It's meant for the country. It doesn't appeal to an external audience. You know, I tell it all the time. Remember what shortwave broadcast is all about. It's programs from a country to people abroad, to somebody else. Radio Romania wants to say what Radio Romania is to us. It's not the Romanian Broadcasting Corporation of whatever in Romanian only that appeals only to the local audience. So that's where you have you mistake the local broadcasters in their own page, but the thing is, it's not what it was. Yeah, but John Arash, it's not Radio Canada International was not what you see on that RCI page. And that language, the multilingual thing that you see on the RCI, is about a quarter of what it was 10 years ago. And it's almost dead because every year they're trying to find a way to remove it completely. That RCI webpage, I tell you, in 5 years, it won't even be there anymore. And it's darn difficult to find too. Because they are the CBC intentionally is trying to get rid of it. They don't want to have that. They don't want to see that. So no, the stations, the internet has not replaced any shortwave stations that has gone. So give me Radio Finland, give me Radio Norway, give me I don't know, even Radio Prague and Radio Slovakia. I say it all the time. I remember on one of the Radio Slovakia um, mailbag shows when they left shortwave. When they left shortwave, they came back with a relay on WRMI about a year later. Why are you coming back with a relay? Yeah, I know it's a public corporation, Ring. It's what I mean by that is it's a public corporation. It's like the CBC, which is a public corporation, also pretty much. But it's like it's what I mean by that is it's a country thing. I mean, it's the BBC's core is in the UK. It's what I want to say is more something like that, and not the fact that it's owned by the government. It's Voice of America is owned by the government and is a government voice. That is a government voice. But no, I totally know. It's just the way that I'm using the words is different. I'm not wording it correctly, but um, the thing is that it's anything that is for outsiders like shortwave was giving us is not there, and that is a big difference. So no, the internet is not why stations stop broadcasting to North America, because they don't have that content to North America anyways. We don't have the content. Most of them stopped, and there's nothing online to replace it. So that's something to check at. Look at what you're getting online. You ain't getting the shortwave of what was that country. What's left, if it is still available in English, is pretty much, the content from the country to the people of that country, not the content for us. Now, it could be interesting to you if you listen to it. It's like the World Radio Network. Just to give you an idea, the World Radio Network is a very poor representation of what it used to be. The World Radio Network, in um, in the years that it started, it was absolutely fantastic, um, because it had all of those shortwave broadcasters. It had that international voice to it, and all the shortwave broadcasters had, a lot of them had content in it. And I remembered thinking, well, this is the future of what we're going to see with radio. And until the shortwave broadcasters went away, when they went away, the World Radio Network content was gone also. So it it's not the case. It's not the case. Look at what you have on the internet. It's not a replacement of anything, for the most part, that we had on shortwave. And all the broadcasters that are streaming and giving us shortwave, it's like the BBC. It's because they want to have both platforms working. But you know what? Just streaming, you're gonna take a lot of people that are not gonna be there anymore. Here in North America, we're more connected, but there's a lot of countries around the world where they're not, and you gotta be careful. The shortwave content and what you have on online is different, and it doesn't replace it. Thank you for the tip, Bob. Thank you so much. Have a good pizza time. What else do we have? What else do we have? But like I said, Jean Arrache, the what you have on the internet is not what Radio Canada was. Like a lot of broadcasters, also even Radio Australia, what you have from Radio Australia is the ABC. It's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. It ain't Radio Australia the way we had Radio Australia in the 80s and 90s, which was a dedicated service for the Asia Pacific region, which was nice. But in the last years before Radio Australia left, it wasn't that anymore. It was like Radio Canada International. They had removed the Radio Canada um, feel of what it is and replaced it with much more localized CBC stuff. You'd listen to Radio Canada International and you'd hear the traffic report from, Montreal or Toronto or stuff. It's like, that's not what you want to hear. It doesn't matter for, people abroad. They don't care. That's not what you want. It wasn't the voice of Canada to the world anymore. It was just a voice of Canadians, but not made in a way that it's catered for an international audience. It was very different in the end. Usually, when a station goes there, it's close to the end because you shut down the voice that it has. So it's very, very different. You might like still some of the content you hear there, and it's still a lot of like if you listen to Australia, yeah, you're listening to Australia and all of that, but you're not listening to the same thing that you used to have as the content. You're just having the Australian Broadcasting Corporation that's streaming online, and it's not streaming to you. Let's be fair here. The streaming of Australia, for example, and Radio Australia and all of that is for Australians. They aren't really interested in knowing if here in North America we are listening to it or not. Contrary to what Radio Australia was in its good days, because that's what it was meant for. an audience outside of Australia. What else do we have? Grandpa Piper Mike says the Magic Band is fantastic. I have worked USA, Canada, Aruba, Zimbabwe, South Africa on 6 meters. Pretty nice, pretty cool. Yeah, ECJB, Kev Michael, nice to have you here. ECJB is not on the internet. You know, if that was the case, all of these things we listen to would have would still be there, but in streaming format. And I would agree with you at that time. Oh yeah, you're right. The reason their stations have stopped streaming to North America is because they're all streaming the stuff online. But none of that is there. So no, they're not replacing it, which means they're not doing it online for that reason. They're just removing themselves because it's an expensive thing. And for a lot of what the thing is, a lot of it is the fact that um, I lost my train of thought here because I was watching the chat go by. So, anyways, it's just not the same. So, nope, they're not replacing any of that to North America with a streaming platform because all of them are going away. And what's left is, like Deutsche Welle, which is, the German voice through the world. It's a big broadcaster. That's why it has some English broadcast streaming online. Because it's like the BBC. They will always have an online presence. These big broadcasters will be there. The Australia Broadcasting Corporation will be there. But take the smaller countries that had a voice, they're not there. And if they're there, they're only there in their own language. They don't have English, French, or anything else. I'd like to listen to Radio Norway. It was interesting. Radio Sweden, which is reduced now to, to give you an idea of how unpopular listening to streaming is for these broadcasters. Radio Sweden used to have a daily Radio Sweden show, 30 minutes. When they left Shortwave, they had 30 minutes of Swedish program. I listened to that podcast that they put out every day. It was a podcast available online. And then they came to, we're going to do it only once a week. Why? Because they noticed that nobody's interested. People are listening when they're on shortwave. They don't seem to be listening when they're on a podcast form from the station. And that's what I was talking and referring to earlier about the fact that Radio Slovakia, when they came back via WRMI, they came back because they did say that when they went only streaming only with podcast only, they lost all of their audience, So it's not the same. It ain't true that it's replacing. If it was, we'd have a lot more of catered content to us streaming form. None of that is happening. Anyways, I'm not mad. Sometimes I'm very passionate of what I talk, but it's always nice to have you here, too, Brookton. What else do we have? Yeah, a lot of the broadcasters are kind of switching off stuff like BBC Radio 4. By the end of the year, you're going to have Denmark off longwave. Denmark is going to be gone on what 234. I think they're the frequency. So Blugger Die 2115 ascending. Yeah, some people have been hearing tones. They say that they've been hearing tones. So you're hearing the tones that they're sending out. So definitely 87, 88, WLO is back and working. Pretty cool. Keegan DXer, nice to have you here from Northwest Arkansas. We have What do we have? Anthony, who misses the voice of Greece. Gary 24 fan, if every broadcaster left shortwave started streaming on the internet the exact content they broadcast on shortwave, we wouldn't be doing the show. Yeah, it's possible we wouldn't be doing this show. Kevin Michael misses Radio Australia. Very good station it was. Yep. I think for us in North America, the big part of it is the a big part of it is the morning listening, waking up, having our first coffee in the morning, listening to that famous 9580 kilohertz frequency. Man. WF79 Homebrew, nice to have you on board, my friend. What do you mean Radio Canada International in Southern Illinois? Radio Canada International left, what was it, 2012, something like that? 2012, more than 10 years ago now. Carol W7X WXV doesn't hear anything on 8788. David in Barcelona, nice to have you here. EA3IEK, EA4998URE. Nice to have you on board. Been enjoying openings and 4 meters. Yeah, we don't have that here, 4 meters. Yeah, HCJB Radio Kid on, if you listen to 6050, 6050, the HCJB is still there. It's the last frequency left with content, and you might hear, sometimes it brings me back, because there are times when they have some of those Ecuadorian music. Oh boy, man, when they play those Ecuadorian songs, it just brings me back to the days of HCJB. So Southern Illinois Shortwave is getting ready to take his dipole and mass down and move it. So I'm going to try to avoid more noise, I guess. And it says further down, back, and be using the loop until I get it moved. You're trying to avoid more interference, maybe, while moving it? Jean Arash, back in the teenage days, I was listening to Radio Berlin International. Yep. Radio Berlin International. Aye. What a day. What a day. Something is bad here. I lost a little bit here. I'm going to actually continue to chat. I'm tired of looking at my tablet. Continue to chat on looking at it here on the TV. So Voice of America now is pretty strong, stronger than it was. I'm going to try it here too for the see if by any chance. See if my hand fed can hear something. Joe Michaels, yeah, because they're most broadcasters on shortwave stream. But when WWCR, if it leaves shortwave, you're going to see there's not going to be a WWCR streaming. I can bet you they're all going to go. It's like, it's part of the thing. You got an online or a shortwave service, it doesn't cost much to be online, so you just stream also at the same time. Let me just check it out here. It's sad because, we lost a lot of good content and interesting content that is not there anymore, and what we have left even if there's something left, is not of the quality and of the range of what we used to have. Also, what else do we have? The Mike WX50 used to enjoy listening to ABC domestic Australia stations back in the day. Yeah, when there was a lot of them on the different frequencies. John is continuing the monitoring of 8788. Robert Cross, people paying big money for a radio that for a radio station should be supported on AM radio. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Craig missed the interval signals before this broadcast started. The music. Yeah, there's still a few. I hear the BBC quite often. What else do we have? Um, mm, 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 mm. Yeah, going down, going down. So blogger died, WLO again at 21:30, 3 times, and female announcer. That's what they were saying. It's a female announcer, so you're really hearing them. So it's pretty nice. I'm gonna try later when the propagation on that frequency to Alabama will be better, because it's full daytime now, so it's going to be interesting. Joey Jojo, what's my favorite pocket shortwave radio? One that actually fits in a pocket. I would probably say the Texan PL330 fits in a pocket and is an amazing all-around general coverage with single sideband. Sensitive, works great, and just the right size. It will be probably, if somebody would ask me for a travel radio, that would be the case. Travel radio also. Definitely a cool radio. That would be my go-to pocket radio. Okay, yeah, the X Party line with Clayton Howard. I have the QSL card here, which is the official QSL card from ACJB when Clayton and his wife um, stopped doing the X Party line. That was my Saturday night listening. The X Party line. I loved musical mailbag too. It was kind of fun. Ecuadorian music on HCJB was always kind of mesmerizing. It was nice. It was fun to listen to. And I like the chit chat of the musical mailbag of just talking about stuff, reading letters of the listeners, and they were having cookies and cake and all sorts of things. It's kind of fun. I like the ambiance. The way it was done was cool. Kevin Michael remembers Radio Norway, Radio Denmark, 70s, 80s. It was cool to hear those countries. Radio Netherlands was one of my favorites. Yep. It was favorite for a lot of people. Radio Netherlands was cool. They had such an extensive series of little booklets or pamphlets that you can actually ask. They had reviewed so many radios, how to build your own little antennas. Those were the days. There's so much stuff that you could get. Sergio Dorantes. Just lost my spot. I'm trying to find. There you go. Hola. Thank you so much. Nice to have you here, Sergio. And let's pray for let's pray for a good future for shortwave radio. I can tell you that. Craig used to listen at night, Staten Island, New York, English language broadcast from major international broadcasters. Yeah. Saved by grace. So many stations have been lost when switching over to digital and streaming. Yeah, but that's not what the stations, the like I said earlier, it has nothing to do with switching to streaming or anything. That's not what killed for the stations. The stations were already, and the other case that a lot of people seem to forget, a big chunk of the stations left before even streaming was a thing. The I think the first wave, there was a peak of shortwave radio, which we could kind of say was, from the 60s to the 80s, there was this big peak. The 80s was the start of the decline. From 1980 to 1990, there was already some stations that had disappeared. We had lost Brazil in English. We had lost quite a few stations already. The 90s saw a big decline because the Cold War was a turning point. When the Cold War stopped, a lot of countries probably reevaluated, do we still need to have an international voice talking about, you know, to an international audience about our viewpoints and who we are? And some of them continued, but a lot of them kind of faded away. Then from 2000 to 2010, we had continued, but none of that was due to streaming or listening online. Most of them were even thinking about it or talking about it. So a lot of it was gone before even the internet was a thing for listening to anything online. It's a great indication that was the decline of shortwave had nothing to do with the internet. It was simply um, a money thing. A lot of countries and a lot of decided, well, why are we spending all these millions of dollars to talk to strangers overseas? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of government um, entities, a lot of government people that just looked at the budgets and said, we're spending 50 million a year on this thing called radio blah blah. What's that? Can we just take that 50 million and just put it on something else? So a lot of that was the reason behind the decline. And if in exchange you have nobody out there, and that's another thing. If just to give you an idea of how streaming did not kill the shortwave side, if that was the case, if streaming was a thing, that means that people would be writing in to stations saying, hey, I'm sending you an email because I listened to your stream. And they would actually blatantly say, well, we decided that shortwave is not necessary anymore because streaming is the thing. The only broadcaster I've heard saying that is the BBC, because the BBC surely has numbers of how many people are streaming, that's for sure. And the BBC is a big major broadcaster that is very different in nature and what a lot of the rest is. So partly, yeah, the BBC is the broadcaster that probably has the biggest streaming audience. I wouldn't be surprised that the BBC is one of the biggest streaming audience out there. Still, shortwave has a side to it that you never have to forget, and I think the BBC is forgetting that side. If the world was perfect and everybody had internet, there would be zero use for shortwave, or almost. But it's not the case, and disasters arrive, and wars, get there, just like at Ukraine. So there's all of that going on. But remember that if that replacement was a thing, they would still be there because they'd be streaming. Like Radio Netherlands was streaming as it was broadcasting. Radio Netherlands was online. You could listen to it online. And what did they say when they left? Nobody was listening. Nobody was writing in. the number of letters they were getting was nothing. Well, if streaming replaced it, how come they didn't get more letters? They didn't. They just were losing listeners, and there was less and less people listening. Nobody was going to the stream. Once again, that's the reality. The reality is on some platforms with some specific things, streaming is a thing. Yes. But on a lot of the things that we had on shortwave, it is not. People are listening on their radio for shortwave broadcasts. And when that ends, they just let's do something else. They don't go online doing, I'm going to listen to the online service of something. I haven't heard a lot of people telling me that they've been listening to the streaming of Radio Canada International. I can tell you that. And radio and the CBC refuses to tell us how many people are actually listening. Kind of interesting. RJ Dakota used to walk around my neighborhood with my portable shortwave radio and listen to WRNO and Radio RSA. Yeah, I would bring over my Realistic DX100 to my neighbors, and we would listen. I would show them that you could listen to stations from around the world, and I would tune in to Radio Berlin and Radio RSA and Radio Sweden and whatever, Call Israel. As I wanted my neighbor that was Greek, didn't even know in 1984-ish, he didn't even know we had a shortwave service from Greece. I went to his home one day with one of my radios, tuned. Here, this is the English service of the Voice of Greece. And then on another frequency, I tuned and I said, this is the general Greek service. And he said, wow, I didn't even know there was such a thing. It's interesting because even in the 80s and even in the times of higher, a lot of more people knowing about, shortwave, there's still a lot of people that just didn't know that these things existed. Southern Illinois, moving the dipole because I'm going to build a 24 by 24 pole building where it's at now. Okay. Tech guy hearing something on the 8764. Kevin Michael, 7020 with ham radio in LSB, California. Yeah, WINO. Sunwave, Shannon Radio coming in on 11253. Southern Illinois, shortwave. My noise is pretty low out here in the country. About S2, just need to move it. Yeah. You lucky bum. I want to have that kind of noise. I want to have an S2 noise too. Give me my noise. Michael, this program has good content. Rayboy, what I like about ACJB was its basic decency. Like I say it all the time, it was a religious broadcaster. Its main goal was to have us, join in with their basic religious ideas, but it didn't do it in a way that it was annoying. For someone like me, it was listenable. I had no problem with the way you did it. It's not like today's religious broadcasters on shortwave, which are just annoying. And not just annoying. More than that, a lot of them are on the edge, if not into just being blatantly flawed and unacceptable in any way. Tech guy out of Norfolk, Virginia. It sounds, because all the marine broadcasts that you can hear from different areas, a lot of it, even from different areas around the world, around the United States, often have their starting point from Norfolk, Virginia. Carol, W7 WXV, hearing the Point Reyes, California on 8682. 11 New York, nice to have you here. Blogger Die, PL 330. Um, what do we have? Just lost it here. Try to find it again. Here we go. Blogger Die, my PL330 is my travel radio. It's just a perfect size and the perfect performance. It works great. Doug Smith, can I nominate Texan S501X as the best portable of the decade? I wouldn't put it best portable of the decade necessarily, but it's darn good. But if you want to, why not? Because all radios have flaws, and none is perfect. I hate pinpointing one and saying that's the best of the best. I rather have an ensemble of radios, a set of radios that says these are the ones that if you want to buy one, you choose one of those and you're not going wrong. More than take this. And if you notice my approach, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you like those big, the 501 expensive. I talk about it. I don't push it as you should buy that. It's great. And if I had no shortwave radio and I want one back and I just need one, I would probably, if not the 501, probably get the 990. But, if I didn't have the money, I mean, there's a lot of other great radios out there. And so I'd rather have, as a saying, there's all of these are great. Pick what's in your budget in those radios, and you'll have a great radio. Kevin Michael, been listening to 8764 Marine Forecast from Point Reyes, California. Hey, I heard Point Reyes, California. Not Point Reyes, California. I heard San Francisco Aero Communications for the first time ever this week. I had never heard San Francisco air traffic control here on the East Coast. And it's while tuning around this week that I heard something faint and looked, and it was San Francisco. I was like, whoa, I'm hearing the air traffic on the West Coast. So cool. Yeah, missionaries, pretty much. Programs on HCJB. DX Banded, nice to have you here from Phoenix, Arizona. Blogger Die, Radio Peking sent his capitalist running dog a copy of, it's kind of fun. There's a lot of stuff like that. Robert Cross, how is HG Radio getting on in America? It's not really getting on. Nobody knows it exists. They don't really talk about it. And I'd say that in the last 10 to 15 years, a big chunk of all the AM stations in HD shut it down. So it's not in the best of forms, and it's not catching on. There would need to be more proactive, talk about it, mentioning it. Most stations that are HD are not even mentioning they have an HD signal. And finding an HD radio is obviously very difficult. Finding a radio is already difficult now. Finding an HD radio, almost impossible unless you buy it online. Mike WX50, remember those Radio Netherlands white papers on receivers? Yep, they were nice. They were nice. What else do we have? Yeah, DX Party Line. That was a great program. I loved that. Lots of countries in Europe split or reunited. Yeah. Michael, Radio Moscow was good. Yep. Well, it didn't go after the Cold War. Radio Moscow was there until it still called itself Radio Moscow until it changed to Voice of Russia. The Voice of Russia part of Radio Moscow was not bad in the 90s. Where it turned sour is when Vladimir Putin came to power. And it suddenly moved from a general-ish mainstream Russian broadcaster to a Russian propaganda machine again. And as much as the Cold War and the USSR, when we think about it, and when I listen and I remember hearing the broadcasts, Radio Moscow was more entertaining than what the voice of Russia became under Vladimir Putin. It became unlistenable, totally unlistenable, honestly. So, Blogger Die says WLO at 21:45. So every 15 minutes, there's something. Okay, cool. I'm going to be monitoring that tonight. I'm going to check it out. Jacko Boney Show. The buzzer is unavailable in the day. The buzzer on 4625. Well, it's always there. It's just propagation that's not making it. Andy, nice to have you here. 2E0REE. Kevin Michael, BBC was good on shortwave back in the day. Yeah, it's still good. The 04 UTC from Madagascar is so good here. It's a local listening. It's like a local broadcast on 12095, and I love it. My routine for this summer will be listening to 12095 at 04 every night with a portable or anything, especially plugged into my NFED, because the NFED gets it better than my MLE30. Boy, does it have a good signal. I'm very happy to have that hour that is very, very easy to listen to and fun to listen to also. RJ Dakota, remembered almost the day when Radio Moscow went off, and shortly thereafter was Voice of Russia. Yeah. Jim's Radio Check. Has anybody seen those Apple goggles that you could put on and scan the internet and watch movies? Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Mike WX50, the aliens are going to contact via shortwave. They'll be on the pirate bands. That would be fun. The new alien pirate bands. Sunwave, I generally hate online streaming, because the slap the word radio on it, but there's no radio involved. Well, not totally. It depends. If you're on using Wi-Fi, there's a radio signal involved, so it's technically radio technology, but I get what you're saying. I got the WFR32. I kind of enjoy it, but what do I do with it? What do I do with it? I listen to music, 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 and a little bit of streaming of maybe the BBC sometimes or things like that. I almost don't use it for anything else. It's the fun of streaming music and the type of music you like, because all of that is streaming online, and that's great. But when I start going towards the menus, and you know what, I should play more with it and kind of give my assessment on a video. Go to different countries in the listing and check out what's in there. All right, Jay Dakota, to the day it ended, I would always tune into Voice of Greece and had been listening for years, almost decades. Yeah, that was a sad one. MLLB Elect says Senjin ATS 909X2. Kevin Michael, Radio RSA is another favorite too. Opening song. Oh yeah, the interval signal was great. The interval signal was great. Thank you, Francis Moore, for the tip. Yeah, all the tips that you guys are giving me. Matt, by the way, MDK2, thank you so much for your donation that you sent me through PayPal. All of that is going to the radio fund. So I use that to purchase future radios that I'm going to talk about and review. I think the Belka could be maybe the next choice. I don't see a lot of things. I see a lot of variations of of radios like this. I see a lot of variations of things like this in different formats and so on the web, but nothing, they're pretty much all the same thing, just reimagined in a different form factor. So I guess maybe the next step could be a Belka. Yeah. And some salmon for Paul. um, Take care, son in Illinois. Shortwave. Have a great Saturday night. Take care. Keegan DXer, I listen to at least one radio station online as I'm too far away to pick it up without special conditions such as Tropo or eSkip. Craig found a lot of YouTube videos with shortwave radio interval signals. Yep. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff online. Tony, good evening from Ireland. Received the H51X here during the week. First problem was set SSB to 4 kilohertz, switch off and on the radio. It defaults to narrower bandwidth. Biggest issue, radio won't charge batteries. If the radio doesn't charge batteries, look at what you're using to charge it, because there's no problem in charging batteries in general. Remember that the cable that came with it often is the best cable to use, and be sure to charge it from something that will work well. It doesn't charge these radios, and all of them have the same issue with that. It doesn't charge with everything. If you plug it on a PC, if you plug it on a different device, it might not charge. On a PC, by the way, it actually has the ability to play PC audio. It might not charge if you plug it on a computer. Plug it on a dedicated charging thing. If you have your smartphone, if it has a USB port, your smartphone's charger is going to work. But make sure that you choose the correct one. That's why I use, anyways, an external charger today. With all of these batteries and all this stuff, I got maybe 20 18650s today. I charge everything outside. I even have the chargers for the small BL5C cables. But as for the SSB, you switch it manually. The when you actually turn on the radio, it stays in the same bandwidth you chose. So you just choose the correct bandwidth that you want. It's not a problem per se that it was at 4. It's because the default receiver out of the manufacturing plant is defaulted at 4 kilohertz. But you press the bandwidth button to go to 2.2 or 2.8 or something, and you leave it there, and it's going to default always to the same one that you choose last, usually. But for charging the batteries, remember, don't charge it on a computer. It's going to want to actually be your computer speakers. That's what it does when it's plugged into your computer. And when that happens, it doesn't charge. Kevin Michael, too much crackpots on shortwave. Yeah, mostly from the USA. Yeah. Ricky, KNLS Alaska isn't terribly preachy with pop music. Yeah, it's a HCJB ish kind of broadcast. I've heard, because I can't really listen to it much here. I've actually listened to their podcast online, and yeah, it's not too bad. They'll play stuff like, you'll hear, some Cyndi Lauper or whatever, or it's not bad, not bad. But here it's very, very difficult to. I barely hear anything out of KNLS here, and they're broadcasting towards the Asian continent, anyways. What is a good radio store to send for radios? I don't know. They're getting hard to get today. The world is flat on 9330, apparently. But like I said, Tony, make sure that you charge it with a proper charging. If you charge it with your computer, it does not charge. It becomes a computer speaker. So make sure that you're all right with what how you charge it, because I don't know where you bought it. If you bought it through a non-co, it's pretty. The service is great, and even though it could happen, something is wrong. I have a hard time thinking that yours is. Make sure that you check that out correctly. Make sure that you haven't left any. The radio works, so the battery, but don't the batteries when they are. I believe when the batteries are in the compartments, they first of all, it's one battery that charges at a time. There's a switch on the back. I hope you noticed. Second of all, they all had a little tab that you had to pull to remove so that they make contact. Mr. X, what was the very first radio you had, and what year did you find your interest in radio communications? Technically, the first ever radio I owned was a Ernie in the Bathtub AM radio. So, for anybody that knows Sesame Street, there's Bert and Ernie. I had Ernie in the Bathtub. I would love to find one today in working order that I would purchase at a decent price. So Ernie in the Bathtub is an AM radio. It was given to me. I was 7 years old, maybe. That's my first time I had a radio. The first communications type radio that I had is my father purchased a multi-band radio from there was a chain of stores in Canada called Consumer Distributing. It was a very weird store. You'd go in, there was a catalog, you'd write down the number of the item you wanted, you give it to somebody at the counter, and then you'd waited, and 5 or 10 minutes later, somebody came out with the box, and you had your thing. What was sad about that store chain is that half of the time they didn't have anything. But anyways, we went there, and my dad wanted to try a multi-man radio that he had seen. So that was my first real experience. First time I actually dabbled into shortwave, but I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what SW1, SW2 meant on the dial, what it was. I don't even remember having a manual in that box, which is kind of interesting. It had VHF low, VHF high, and it had AM, FM. And I remember I was listening to airplanes. My next door neighbor didn't believe me until I tuned the frequency and he heard Air Canada 246. I was like, oh, you're hearing a plane? Yeah, I am. I'm not joking. And I was listening to, back then, the Montreal Police was on the 154-ish megahertz range and a VHF. I was listening to Montreal Police also. Shortwave looked mysterious. I would tune around and hear all these weird things and Morse code, and I didn't really grasp any of it at that moment. And I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. The second thing that I had after that for radio, honestly, so I was intrigued. Radio was definitely something that was kind of mysterious, and I wanted to know more about. We had a Radio Shack multiband, this Radio Shack CB60. Now I have both here. I have the SW60 also. The CB60, the difference was that instead of shortwave, it was 40 channels of CB. That I started to tune more and hear all sorts of things, kind of understand more what I was actually dealing with. It was fun. It was kind of interesting. But the first official shortwave radio that I owned, that started it all, really, that I'm here, the reason I'm here, was the Realistic DX100. And I got it in August of 82. The manual was not very big, but it was to the point of what exactly we are going to hear on this radio. And the first night that I tuned around, I heard Israel, I heard Radio Moscow, I heard Radio RSA, I heard tons of stations in English, Radio Berlin. I was totally hooked. I was amazed that I was getting stations from so far away on a radio like that. And that really is what started it all. We should do a special on just using the DX100. It still works. Got it here. And then after that, I went to the Radio Shack or Realistic DX302, which had digital display. That was nice because now I knew where I was tuning. And I mean, that's the moment that really started off all of this. Then when I started working, I got my first real big cool radio, the Kenwood R5000. Now that was the first time that I had some really good rig, and that's pretty much what it is. I had, of course, the scanner craze like everybody else, and also all sorts of things. Like I still have there. It's looking at me, just in front of me. There's the Realistic Pro 2006 scanner radio, and I got still my old scanner radios, portables, the Pro 43, Pro 92. So that's pretty much when it's all started. Ricardo, nice to have you on board from Portugal. Radio Moscow, Tony, was interesting. They had some interesting programming and interesting stuff. We wanted to hear what they had to say. It wasn't too heavy. It wasn't like Radio Tirana. Radio Tirana was like bad. That was if Radio Moscow would have been Radio Tirana, we wouldn't be. I don't think we would be talking about Radio Moscow much. But Radio Moscow was interesting. The way that they dealt with it, I think we could kind of say there was in the stressful Cold War. I lived through the last stressful years of the Cold War in the 80s. Radio Moscow came in as maybe it's not all that bad kind of thing. They didn't seem too bad. They would, they'd answer your letters. Of course, that was the the propaganda of all, but still, there was kind of a reassuring thing about it. If Radio Moscow would have been Radio Tirana, oh hell, nuclear war is almost here. I'm pretty sure all of us would have said that. Nuclear war is almost here. But Radio Moscow was more like relaxed programming. They had their point of view. They had their things to say. They had their news from the Kremlin about whatever, the U.S. was doing or whatever. But still, it wasn't hyping us. It was almost reassuring to one point. There's somebody there on the other side in USSR that kind of sounds, reasonable-ish, if reasonable is a possible term to use in those days, because nobody was reasonable. But like I said, if Radio Moscow sounded like Radio Tirana, oh God, I would have been sure that the nuclear bombs were not that far off. Yeah, I know, Radio Kid. You guys have the Radio Sputnik, which is a horrible outlet of Russian propaganda. It's this Radio Sputnik is what the voice of Russia became and kind of gone into. It's so bad. RJ Dakota, I think the powers that be are trying to turn off HD radio and not just on medium wave. In my area, some local HD2s and 3s did go down. BBC no longer available on our NPR affiliate here. Yeah. Anthony France is hearing Marine Weather 8788. But will the aliens QSL? Yeah, maybe to be friendly. Why not? QSL. Um, yeah, I don't think there's going to be a new flagship. I doubt there will be anything of the like the 501, Tony. RJ Dakota, will I get a QSL from Jupiter? How long will that take? That I don't know, and I don't even know where you could write. Ricky has a routine, which is WRMI 9395 at 02, RRI at 03, BBC via New Zealand at 04, and more New Zealand after that. That's pretty good. Simon Templar, nice to have you here, listening to the buzzer in the Kiwi SDR in Finland. He says there's another signal on 4612. Tony, what's the email to donations for? So if you guys want to give donations, just send it to this email that I'm actually sending here. This is where you can send donations for PayPal through PayPal, and that's going to work. Or else you can there's the chat here. You can use the super chat. PayPal is better because PayPal is pretty much all direct and the fees are small. Here, YouTube takes a cut, but anyway, works. And thank you so much for those that do. It goes towards the radio fund for the future. What else do we have? Tony Yezho, I've tried charging using various cables and wall chargers. That's weird. So it doesn't charge at all. Interesting. Huh. And you tried charging, one battery and the other one? Yeah, well, contact Anon Co. Anyways, Tony, they are good at all of that. They're gonna exchange it. They're gonna exchange it. They're Anon Co. is not a problem. So contact them and let them know and see what happens. It's not impossible that you got something that's not right. I don't see a lot of people that have a wrong one, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. I-61, nice to have you here. Radio Kid, I like radios that use standard batteries. Yeah. Craig, Radio Bonaire. Yeah, Transworld Radio Bonaire. And there was the Netherlands Antilles Netherlands relay. There was BBC using the Antigua relay for North America. Tony says the batteries say bat A will not show CHA. You know what you should do, Tony? You remind me of one thing. Before you contact, remove both batteries and unplug the radio and leave it unplugged until the display goes dark and leave it overnight. Tomorrow, put the batteries back and try again what you were doing. It could simply be that the processor in it is kind of locked, and until you remove the batteries and have the power go off completely, it's not impossible because it happened to me a few times, even with the St. Jean ATS 909, that I put the batteries in, and for some reason it started in a state that was bizarre, and the keys were not responding. So I just removed the batteries and let it go dark, the display go dark and everything, and put the batteries back the next day. In my case, I left it overnight. Put the batteries back the next day and everything was fine. Try that just to see if by chance it's just not in a weird state and it needs kind of a reset. And the reset in these radios for that type of problem doesn't work. You need to leave the batteries off for a while and then put them back. Try that and give us news, anyways, what's happening. Francis Moore, nothing to do with radios or broadcast. You talk about air fryers. So I got an Amazon basic one, and the chips, fish, everything included. Pies are great and healthy. Oh, it's great. I love my air fryer. I'm going to tell you that. Take care, BT Radio. Have a good dinner. So, Tim Hortons. I don't go to Tim Hortons. I don't like what they have. Yeah, long time. But officially, I like to say it's about it's since 1982 that I'm really hooked to radio. Bringing back memories, Greg, eh? And Michael, my dad started me on radios too. Take care, Robert Cross. Stay safe. Ricky, consumers distribution was too many years ahead of its time. A Spartan storefront with a huge warehouse for catalog ordering is basically what some retailers are doing today. Yeah, yeah. It's just not an online thing. My WX50, I got a multi-band radio for my birthday, maybe from Radio Shack. This was a mid-late 70s. Then the DX160. That was a popular rig. The realistic DX160 started a lot of people on shortwave. Dex, hello there. Nice to have you here. I-61 grew up with radio, not so much TV. Yeah, it was a mix. Sometimes I would do both. I would kind of have the TV and the radio at the same time, looking at sitcoms. Rod and Animal, nice to have you here. Please recommend a good site where I can purchase Texan H501. Anonco. Anonco is the place to buy it. Anonco is how it is. Find a website for Anonco. That's where you're going to get it. John, Tampa, Florida. My first was a 7-band multi-band realistic for around 1970. King and the Extra, my dad introduced me to shortwave and FM with his Alicrafters SX62 and ICOM IC706. WWV, first station you heard. I still remember my first time I heard WWV and thinking, that and CHU, thinking, this is weird. Why are there stations giving time? I couldn't understand it. Yeah, we're stern. Yeah. Radio Shack was a big starter for a lot of us. I mean, they had stores everywhere. It was easy. Communist lights. Yeah. I think whoever, RGA Dakota, whoever thought of what should come out of Radio Moscow had the great idea that it should be light. It should be communism, friendly communism. Let's call it like that. Friendly communism. So that they don't sound like crazy people. But Radio Tirana, yeah. That was crazy. I mean, imagine if Radio Moscow would have been Radio Tirana. Youch. I-61, I miss those. All those weird number stations too on shortwave. Well, there's a lot of them still left, though, I-61. If you look at Priam, and there's quite a lot of these mysterious, but a lot of them were creepy with all their interval signal stuff. Kevin Michael, Realistic DX300. The 302 and the 300 were very, very similar in the radio. Hunters out of crafters. There was a time when Radio Moscow would be brutal, but they would say when they were repeating that Tass was saying, try to distance themselves. They always were referring to who they were mentioning. Definitely, it was interesting. It's almost as if Radio Moscow was a thing And they were just saying that here, what we will say now is what the government has to say. So, the Kremlin had to say something. They would actually mention, according to the Kremlin, blah, 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 blah. And of course, TASS, the news agency. It is interesting. I never thought about it like that, but kind of. It was almost as if, well, we're here to entertain. And at the same time, we are the voice that has to pass on these messages from the Kremlin and from, the authorities. Maybe that's why they were more interesting to listen to, because they were like, let's give the audience some interesting stuff to hear in between the official announcements from the Kremlin. RJ Dakota first was a radio was a realistic astronaut 4 portable, then a Panasonic RF 2200, but on the way got a DX 160. Yeah, I don't think they pretended to be friendly. Mike WX50. I think they were friendly in the world that they were. Kevin Michael, I lived through the Cold War. We thought of nuclear war in California too. Yeah, yeah, that was a thing back then. That was a thing back then. First transistor radio, Falcon Crown, way back around 66, 67. Wow, pretty cool. Richard Wagner. James Radio Check started out with a realistic DX100 radio. Oh, it was built like a tank. Yeah, it does have a flaw from what I've seen over the years on the internet. Apparently, a lot of them have a flaw of um, a transistor in the amplification stage that actually goes bad, and the radio becomes deaf on the RF amp. Apparently, a lot of them are having issues with that over time. Mine never did, but apparently. Craig, yeah, sure. Yeah. Or if you want my mailing address, Craig, or anybody, just go on QRZ and look at VE2 ZZI on QRZ. It's all there. But or else send me an email. You can send an email. Shortwave official wave shortwave radio at gmail.com. Ask for the if anybody sends me an international money order, it has to be the international one. Somebody sent me a donation a couple of years, 3 years ago, through one of those international money orders, and he actually took one that was a U.S. money order, which cannot be exchanged. It has to be international money order, and that will work. I can exchange it at a post office or at a bank in any currency. By the way, if you send me whatever currency, they will convert it and give me the money in Canadian dollars. But it really, you have to really, really make sure it's an international money order if you do send money, or if you send money cash into the envelope, make sure you put a lot of paper to make sure that nobody knows. Ricky says Anonco is great. They responded to every query I've ever emailed them. Top notch customer service. Definitely, that is the place to buy any of the radios from Texan. Sunwave. I wonder why my 9-foot wire works good on my portable, but the RSP1A didn't. I had to get 35 feet to hear stations. A big one of the reasons could be that, especially on a wire, if it's not that far, the RSP and the computers together, they create noise, so it might be noisier on that. But if you ever get an MLE30 and the RSP work really great together. David in Barcelona got started with the Sony ICF Shortwave 11 portable, and I had never before used a radio with such a big tuning window and the corresponding tuning dial. John Earnshaw, the best signal of Radio Moscow I received was on an electric guitar on amp. Yeah, in Europe, you guys probably had some really powerful signals from Radio Moscow. Kevin Michael, what do you think of Ethon? Are they made by Grundig Germany? Nope. Grundig Germany doesn't exist anymore in what is anything done there as radios and stuff and electronics. Ethon is, I know that most of the radios they have are made by some of the radio companies in China. So there are some made by Texan, there are some made by Retson, but everything is made in China. It's anything Grundig today does not and is not the quality of Grundig, for sure. Marvin Motz, nice to have you here from the Japan Islands. Keegan DXer, I heard CHU for the first time around 20 years ago. Steve Throne, does anyone know if there is any place to repair my Drake R8, or is it just recycled fodder? Go on. There's a couple of. Oh man, anybody can help there. I know there's a couple of places that are kind of online things where you got to send in. And I know there's a couple of hams that are known to repair stuff and bring them back. I don't know if anybody can help our friend here, because I totally get it, how difficult it is to find anybody to repair any of these radios today. My Kenwood R5000 was bricked pretty much. If it was not for fast load, that radio would not be working. He actually recapped it. He repaired the problems that it had for the dots problem. But I mean, it's so I would not even know where to send a radio to be fixed today if there was such a problem on it. Yep, Radio Shack sold antenna kits. I bought my first discount there. Keegan DXer remembers the announcement of CHU moving from 7335 to 7850 in 2009. Anthony Franz, my first shortwave radio was a Radio Shack DX390 in 1990, and he's hooked since then. Tim, any type of mobile antenna that you could recommend while traveling? Well, the MLE30 is can be very small, and you can bring it along with, just a little battery pack to power it. That would work great. And it doesn't take, packaged in a little something, it would not take a lot of space. Or else, I don't know what you want to use on it too. Is it just for shortwave? Joey Jojo, if I run a long wire in some trees, should I connect it to the coax when it comes in the house and use 50 or 75 ohm coax? So first of all, if you send a piece of wire in a tree, what you do is you will actually put it to the center connector of a coax. The shield, if you do a dipole, you can use like 2 wires, but if you don't, just leave it alone if you have nothing to clip it to. 50 or 75 will not change anything on shortwave. For receive, for transmit, it's different. But just for listening, if you use 50 or 75 ohm coax, you won't see a difference. If you can clip the shield to something metal, at least, that could help in reducing the amount of interference they'll get into the radio. Kevin Michael, first shortwave was WWV on 10 megahertz. Arnie the DX man, nice to have you here. 14293 Upper Sideman. Somebody in Seychelles just worked a PJ4 station in Bonaire. Cool. Robert Varner, the first shortwave station for me was CHU as well. I also thought it was weird. Oh yeah, Radio Shack was the place to go. Definitely. Oh yeah, Radio Tirana, Kevin Michael was creepy. Mike WX50, my first digital display radio was a Kenwood R1000. It was beauty. Yeah. Thanks, Blogger Die, for the recording of WLO. Jean Arash, I tuned to CKUT 10 minutes before the IRR, and a Megal professor I used to operate the control board for at another station was on the air. I didn't know CKUT had Spanish programs. Yeah. CKUT has the show before the International Radio Report is the Latin Times. It's a 90-minute show about news in the Latin world. It's been there for quite a long time. And I remember when we used to go into the station and we always meet the guys as they were ending the show. So Noise says, oh, that makes sense. I have a mountain of noise, 7 megahertz and below. And I do mean a mountain a lot above 18 megahertz. It receives okay. Yeah, any SDR, as the farther away your antennas are from the setup, the better it is, because now you're talking of radio that connects to a very noisy thing, which is a computer. So you want to have all of that as far as possible. Ricky didn't get into shortwave until after the Cold War. If you are able to hear North Korea today, I feel that this is the closest. Yeah, North Korea feels like a lot of what it was like in the 80s and 70s. Yeah, an MLA30 will be great because you'll remove all of that noise. Yep, Mr. Colston Slam. I know Carol W7 WXV. He has a lot of radio fixes stuff. But he does not, like our friend here says, he's not, he doesn't fix radios of people and return them. Here we're looking at somebody that you can send the radio to that would send them back. Kenneth, can shortwave graduate to a new technology in the future that's more efficient for radio stations and listeners? We're stuck in a problem here with shortwave. You can't, look at DRM, which is not picking up because it doesn't work well anyways. And we never had really any radios. One of the biggest problems is that we are also in a world where shortwave caters to a huge audience that has little cheap portables that didn't pay a lot of money, and that they won't change that radio for something else. They don't have the money to do that. So I think shortwave, the only way it could be is to continue the way it is. Because any digital means a new radio, means spending money, and that will, I think, kill shortwave more than help it. Yeah, Ricky, yep. It's been there for a long time. It's been there for a long time, definitely. No, he did not. He just he fixes them, but he doesn't. You can send him a radio, and he's going to play with it and fix it, but he doesn't fix it to return it back to you. So the show is always 10:30 Eastern time. It's 14:30 UTC at this time on CKUT. Hey Sheila, nice to have you here. Oh yeah, Blogger Die. When we had a little quick ice storm here, that's when I learned that my neighbor doesn't have an AM radio. It doesn't have a radio. A lot of people don't. A lot more people don't, I would guess. So it's that's the world we live in. Is as long as everything works. Look at a big city. Um, and when everything works, it works. You don't see the need of getting a radio because you don't see how such technology could not work at some point because you never had that technology not work. So people are, and especially young people today, are on the impression that, yeah, why have a radio when all of this does that? And then we have a quick ice storm, power goes out long enough that all of your devices you lose charge, you don't know what to do. And if your smartphone did still work, the internet access was so creepy, so bad that it didn't really work. So now you were stuck with, I don't have anything to give me any news of what's happening. And that kind of shows from a lot of people, you know what? You better have a radio. You need it. Even if you don't need it that often, you'll need it someday. You know? Sunwave says 14375 for our friend, the Spanish number lady in Cuba. Definitely is there. Definitely is there. Yeah, when you brought up the National Yellow Radio Day. Oh, and I think that what you can understand in there is that a lot of people are in that situation. They just don't know. Hey, Jasmine, nice to have you here from Seattle. Richard Wagner, my DX300 had a bad FET balance mixer. I replaced it with a monolithic pair in Texas Instrument. Blogger I had the DX300, loved that radio. Yeah, the I don't know what the difference was between the 300 and the 302 exactly. I had the 302, but I remember one thing that I noticed over time is how it overloaded easily, and that the way it overloaded is that when a very strong station was near a weak station, the radio's background noise was louder and overpowering weak stations. And I noticed that because when I got the Kenwood R5000, which it replaced the DX300, the 302, I noticed that I would tune a signal, weak signal, not far from a strong signal, was coming clear on the Kenwood. I was unable to tune it well on the DX302. It made me understand that I missed a lot of DX because of that. So it had that big flaw in the receive. Sunwave had some fun with CW Skimmer and SAR Uno, which SAR Uno to digital almost increased the audio pass to cover the entire sort of CW signal. Didn't take long to get 50 unique CW ham call signs. Pretty cool. K6YYL, very nice opening for the contest today on 6 meters SSB. Yeah, here 6 meters has been crappy in the last few weeks. Ricky tried listening to radio via streaming on my mobile a few years ago on the bus from Las Vegas to Phoenix. No dice even for low bitrate audio despite decent cell reception. Keegan remembers the 2009 ice storm, which knocked out power here from January 27th to February 2nd. Listen to FM and shortwave on my Radio Shack DX402 on AA batteries. Yep. Maker Rubin says the Cuba lady has been sitting at an old rusty steel desk for years. Best DJ in town. Kenneth, my shortwave was very handy when everybody had no internet and the hurricane knocked all the local AM FM stations out in Louisiana. Yep. Francis, as I said earlier, this year I lost my mom after 9 years caring. I have to downsize and have to sell a lot of my sets, some unused, brand new. Would you sell to a dealer or sell it on eBay? If you have time, I would probably take the time to sell them on eBay. You'll get probably more money. But then again, it's taking the time to, put a price, and you'll have to package them to send them in. And it depends on what asshole you want to go through. Do you want it to be quick and easy? Just go somewhere they're going to, they're going to buy it, even if you're not going to get that great of an amount. And it's gone. Or if you want to make more money, it's going to also be more work. It's really up to you what you want to do with it, honestly. Sheila, last year's Rogers Communication and Infrastructure outage here in Canada proves the need for older bulletproof technology like AM radio. Definitely. Sir Joseph, nice to have you here from Pokemon City, Maryland. Nice to have you here. Like I've had good experience selling radios on eBay. And that's the way you're going to get the most money. That's for sure. It all depends on how, how you want to go through it. Sunwave. Oh, and by the way, it is a legit RSP1A because I bought it at Ham Radio Outlet and asked SDR Play Tech Support to verify its serial number. Even though it said made in Great Britain on the box. Yeah, because SDR is a UK company. They make their own devices there. So, but yeah, there's a lot of fake RSP1As. Like, there's a lot of fake SDR, RTL SDR V3s. You really need to buy it at a good place. Shortwave Radio Archive, good video on pirate radio that you posted a few days ago. Your pirate world music radio is being heard in North America on 6950 AM. Carol, which signal goes farther at the same power level, AM or FM? It will be, so here's the thing. The reason why aircraft use AM is because if two signals are together, or if there's distortion on propagation of some sort, the thing is that AM has more chance of still being a signal that you can understand than FM. FM sounds great, but can easily garble into something you don't understand. In terms of going further, both will go the same distance, but one will be easier to hear past a certain threshold. So AM will win when the signal gets too weak compared to FM. You'll be able to hear a very weak AM signal and still understand what it says, where an FM signal would just be garbled out. So it's more of a question of the mode of transmission is what makes one easier in some instances than other. FM is more resistant to interference because it's a wider, much in general, it's a wider signal. So it actually resists interference a little more, But if you are into a situation where two FM signals get together on the same frequency, they're going to interfere, and you'll not understand a thing. It's going to be just garbage. Where an AM signal, you might still be able to make it and still understand it. It's really much more of a way that one works compared to the other in the modulation of the audio once it's actually decoded inside the receiver. So anyway, clear communication is extremely important for the aviation industry. Yeah, that's why they use AM, because in situations of low signal or interference with another signal, say from another plane, AM has more chance of being still, a signal that you'll be able to understand. The FM might actually just, be garbled, and that's all, and you won't be able to make it. So that's why the VHF airband is in AM mode. You might think, why is everything on the VHF, UHF, FM, or depending, let's not talk about the amateur band or any digital stuff. And suddenly the airband is AM. Well, it's for making it easier to be able to still go through and make communication in case something's happening. Kamikaze 76, nice to have you here from West Michigan. It's hard for me to say hello live lately, so I wanted to say something. Nice to have you here, my friend. Sunwave says, I heard what 2FM signals sound like. It sounds terrible. Yeah. No problem, Carol. Craig, yeah. Danny, Shortwave Radio DX, nice to have you here from Yonkers, New York. Been fixing up the new second door floor home office. Hope everybody is doing well. Hope you're well too, my friend. Sunwave, you know what is neat? We're seeing Coda on 13500 at night, then load up U20 SDR and you can see the same thing. Yeah. What is fun with an SDR is definitely the visuals of a signal. You get enough experience in tuning around your SDR, you will at some point get to, oh, this is that type of signal. I've seen it before. I know that it's that. SM, what do you think of Nikon IC718 transceiver to use for shortwave listening? For the most part, all those transceivers are great. I look at my Yaesu. I've complained about the 12 kilohertz filter being too wide, but it in practice rarely has been a problem in this case. And shortwave listening on it is great. And I'm pretty sure any ICOM transceiver out there, shortwave listening is great. So I'm pretty sure that, if any AMs that want also to do shortwave listening, get yourself a nice transceiver and it'll do the job. And that's the nice thing today. There were way too more problems in the past because there were so many um, um, radios, transceivers that were just locked into ham bands and not giving us the full, spectrum of shortwave, which was sad. Now today they're all general coverage receivers, which is great. Carol, so the next question is, why doesn't the VHF airband use a single sideband, which would give us the same power more efficiently? Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, why would they use AM over SSB, which technically can go further away? It's I don't know. I don't know why SSB would not. I think they just, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why they would I've not chosen SSB over something else. I don't know if somebody knows. Someone says I know, so we'll wait for his answer. That'd be interesting to see. You know, I mean, it's with a good radio. You know, yeah, that could be a reason. VHF more local. We can want to be hear the aircraft outside of its boundaries. Yeah, that is a possibility. That is a possibility. We don't want that signal to go too far either. You know, you don't, because you'll reach. You know, when the plane switches to VHF, it switches at a certain distance. You know, it's within a certain distance that it will switch on to the VHF range. Yeah, maybe it is possible that SSB signals would tend to maybe go too far and be interference to somebody else further down. You know, maybe another airport close or something, or another plane. Could be. Could be. It is totally possible. Well, we got to be careful, John, Tampa, Florida, because AM signals is very important. AM signals follow the same rules that any other signal will have, depending on the frequency used. So if we talk about the VHF range, the AM signal does not follow the curvature of the earth. Like an FM signal, it will just straight line, it's line of sight. And AM will follow that rule also. The fact that an AM signal follows the curvature of the earth is dependent on the frequency. And that, for example, is the case with medium wave, an AM signal on the medium wave band, very low frequencies. Now, yes, there is some, that AM signal will follow the curvature, but it's not because it's an AM signal. It's because of the frequency that is used for the transmission. That frequency range is capable of somewhat following the curvature. But on VHF at 130 megahertz, it is line of sight like every other signal. So it's not the curvature of the earth is not dependent on the AM signal or the mode used. It's dependent on the frequency used, which is a different thing. What else do we have? Grandpa Piper Mike, back in the happy days, the transmit the same frequency stability. That is also absolutely a possibility. So there's the fact that to have single sideband, you need very high precision devices. So it's not, you know, on AM. I've heard when I was listening to a lot to the airband here, I've heard small planes with their transmission being actually off frequency, but still being okay with the airport because it was still easy to hear. So that would be one other great explanation of for the purpose of having a clear signal and not having to worry too much about the transceiver, the transmitter could be off frequency slightly. AM, once again, does the job for that. John, AM clear audio to non-experienced user, usually over engine and wind noise. It is a wider bandwidth, so definitely probably has better audio. And that also is another one that is definitely, definitely a good. So, we got some great answers here that it's definitely a possibility. So, and that's another thing. I mean, the VHF airband is so wide that having a narrow mode to save space also would not be useful technically. There's a lot of space to transmit on it. Craig, my favorite international shortwave radio station that has English language. I like a lot of them. You know, um, I love a lot of broadcasters. I like Radio New Zealand. I like Radio Romania. That it has interesting programs. I like a lot of stuff. I can't say I can pinpoint a favorite. I like a lot of what's around. So no problem, John. Tampa, Florida. It's because sometimes the biggest mistake that I think a lot of people do and especially in North America, because we decided to name bands after a mode of transmission, AM radio, for example, and FM radio, and a lot of people have started thinking that AM does so. Like we're thinking about curvature of the earth following the ground. Um, a lot of people think, oh, it's an AM thing. And it's because we had the bad idea of simply using the mode of transmission to identify a broadcast. So instead of, in reality, what we should have seen on radios is medium wave and VHF, because that's the real band we are listening to. When you're on the AM radio band, you're in the medium wave band. When you're on FM radio listening, you're in the VHF range. That is how it should have been identified. And then we would have, everybody would have understood, oh, it's a medium wave that does that, follow curvature. It's one of the reasons why long wave was used a lot also in Europe, because long wave is even more capable of following a curvature of the earth than medium wave. So because we named the bands AM and FM, for a lot of people, and I see it regularly, a lot of people are like, well, how do I get on shortwave? It says AM on my radio dial. Yeah, you're on shortwave. AM is a mode of transmission. It's not a band. And because we named AM radio as it is, a lot of people are mixed up. They're like, I don't get it. Yeah, on shortwave stations, international broadcasters are in AM mode. And that confuses a lot of people because of the way we just handle all of that. What else do we have? Yep, definitely amplitude modulation or a frequency modulation. It's but we decided to call the bands on our radios AM FM. So we called it by their type of transmission type, not by their band or frequency range. J Dakota, yeah, it's actually medium wave, not AM. There's a lot of AM or FM transmission methods in the USA. People are somewhat genuinely confused. Yep. When somebody tells me, I had somebody once tell me, I'm confused. Why is there? So there we have FM radio, and you talk about there's FM transmissions on the amateur bands and the 10-meter band. Yeah, because it's a mode of transmission. And actually, the FM and the amateur band is a different FM. It's a narrow FM, where the actual FM radio we listen to is wide FM. It's a very large version to have better audio quality in it. Chris Barnes, I find it really difficult to find long wave signals in Australia. Is it a geographical reason? Is there just isn't any medium wave, long wave signals down here? You probably don't have a lot of long wave stuff way down there in Australia. It's already tough here in North America, it's probably a lot worse where you are in Australia. So we have a Chat GPT response over AM. Yeah, Chat GPT is depending on the answers is not always, you know. Somebody says not even a long wave beacon here anymore, so I turned off the long wave option on my PL330. Yeah, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter if it's on anyways. You can, you know, still check it out. Take care, Carol. Stay safe. So, hey guys, we've been on for what, 3 hours and 5 minutes. Hope you enjoyed the show today. We'll be back next week, where we're going to talk more about radio, and we're of course going to take it easy. I don't know yet what I'm going to eat. I think I have leftover shrimp bang bang, so I think I'm going to eat that tonight. So take care, everyone. It was nice to have you on board. It was a nice discussion also about radio in general, and you know, seeing everybody's point of view of why, what, where, and how it is all happening. So thanks so much, guys, for being here. It's always a lot of fun. Once again, I'll share it if you want to donate to the radio fund, so that maybe I'll get, possibly we'll check out for a Belka receiver. Just send the money to. You can of course have here the super chat, or you can just send it through PayPal through the address that I'm showing up again. So thanks so much for being here, guys. Always nice to have you here. Hey, Michel Colette, via DCO 73. Always nice to have you on board. And hey, stay safe. I'm going to be doing radio tonight, so I'm going to be checking it out. I'll check a little more of the 6 meters, see if I can hear anything. And we're going to come back next Saturday at 20 hours Universal Time as usual. Take care, my friends. Stay safe. Love you all. And see you soon.